There's a moment that happens after you stop arguing with yourself. It doesn't arrive loudly, it doesn't announce itself, it shows up quiet. The kind of quiet that feels unfamiliar when you've spent years carrying that noise inside of your head. You notice that you no longer are rehearsing explanations in your mind. You no longer are trying to convince yourself that what you're feeling isn't real, and you're no longer pushing the awareness away with busyness or responsibility or logic. You're just there with yourself. And that's when you realize something important. You already know. You may not know what comes next in practical sense, but you know that something has shifted. You know that continuing the same way isn't an option anymore. And you know that the cost of staying disconnected from yourself is starting to outweigh the comfort of familiarity. Owning your own next chapter doesn't feel like confidence in the way that we're taught to recognize it. It doesn't feel bold or decisive or fearless. It feels grounded. It feels like standing still long enough to stop abandoning yourself. For a long time, you've probably told yourself that you just need more clarity or more time or more certainty. That once that everything lined up, you'd give yourself permission to move differently. But what you begin to understand in this season is that clarity isn't something that you wait for. It's something that emerges when you stop postponing yourself. I remember realizing that nothing external was actually stopping me. There wasn't a rule I was breaking. There wasn't a deadline I had missed. There wasn't anyone standing in my way. What was stopping me was my loyalty to an old version of myself. If that's you, you feel guilty, press number 1 in the comments. The version of me who survived by pushing. The version of me who was needed everywhere. The version of me who believed rest and alignment were things you earn later. Letting go of that loyalty felt unsettling because once you acknowledge that you're allowed to choose differently, you have to face the truth that you've been choosing to stay the same. Not because you had to, but because it felt safer than change. Owning your next chapter is not about reinvention. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about being honest about who you already are. It's admitting that you don't want to keep paying the same price for success, that you don't want your days to feel heavy, that you want your life to reflect the wisdom you've earned, not just the resilience you've built. The kind of ownership doesn't demand action right now. It asks for presence. It asks you to stop pretending you don't know what you know. There's a temptation in this moment to wait, to tell yourself you'll revisit this after the holidays, after things settle down, after you get through one more busy season. But deep down, you already understand what's waiting isn't actually neutral. It's exhausting, and it keeps you suspended between who you've been and who you've been becoming. And being suspended like that takes more energy than choosing support. What makes this moment bearable and even hopeful is not having all the answers. It's knowing that you don't have to carry the questions alone anymore. And that's why spaces like the VonSwy Recreation Station exist. Not as a solution, not as a fix, but as a place where you're allowed to stand in your awareness without being rushed into decisions or explanations. A place where you can be honest about how much you've been carrying. A place where you don't have to perform clarity before you're ready. For some women, owning the next chapter also brings a desire to speak out loud, not to be coached or directed, but simply be heard by someone who understands the weight you carry. And that's why one-to-one conversations are available too. Because sometimes ownership begins with a quiet space where you're finally allowed to say what you've been holding inside without interruption. If you're watching this and something in you feels steady in a new way, I just want you to trust that. Not excitement, not urgency, not steadiness. That steadiness is alignment. And you don't need to announce anything today. You don't need to make a big move. You don't need to have a perfect plan, but you can choose not to do this alone anymore. You can choose to honor what you already know. You can choose to support yourself in this season instead of pushing yourself through it. So tomorrow, we'll close this series by talking about what it looks like to move forward with intention, not fear, not pressure, just trust. For now, let this land. Your next chapter doesn't need permission. It needs honesty. My name is LaTashia Martin, also known as Techie Tasha. I work with high capacity women who have a yearning and a desire for freedom and flexibility and realize, or maybe don't realize, that community is the only key to make it happen. Thank you for being here today. And until tomorrow, God bless.